In an instant, everything we know could flip upside down. Imagine waking up to a world plunged into darkness, the sun suddenly vanishing from the sky for just 24 hours. No warning, no explanation, just an eerie silence where sunlight once flourished. As the seconds tick by, chaos erupts across cities, ecosystems cling to fragile hope, and the very fabric of daily life unravels instinctively. People reach for their phones, desperate for answers, while the environment begins to reel, plants halting, temperatures dropping, as if the planet itself is holding its breath. But beyond the immediate panic, we're forced to confront a deeper question. What does it truly mean to be dependent on that fiery ball in the sky? As darkness falls, so too does humanity's certainty, nudging us to ponder whether light is just a gift or a fragile illusion, an essential part of our existence that could disappear in a heartbeat. The sudden darkness. Without the sun's luminous presence, a sudden darkness would strike with an almost tangible force, transforming the world into an alien landscape overnight. The sunlight is the cornerstone of life on Earth. It drives photosynthesis, sustains ecosystems, and establishes our natural circadian rhythms. Without it, the sky would turn a void-like black, suffused with a ghostly pallor, where stars would momentarily shine through the thick, unnatural gloom. The absence of that familiar bright glow would be immediately disorienting. Cities, bustling with nocturnal activity, would plunge into an eerie silence. Streetlights might flicker on in a desperate, malfunctioning attempt to illuminate the streets, but their glow would be feeble and futile against the vast darkness enveloping the planet. The psychological impact would ripple across every living creature. Humans rely heavily on the sun's cycle for mental stability. Its sudden disappearance would evoke primal fears and confusion. Anxiety would spike as people realize that day has suddenly turned into an endless night, with no warning or explanation. The collective consciousness might wrestle with bizarre thoughts. Are we under attack? Has something catastrophic happened? News outlets, if still operational, would scramble to interpret or explain the phenomenon, but no immediate explanation would satisfy the shock of such an unfathomable event. Panic could spread as millions wrestle with uncertainty, clutching their phones or looking skyward in disbelief. Meanwhile, the environmental repercussions would be profound. Temperatures could begin to plummet rapidly, especially in regions that depend on the sun's warmth to sustain agriculture and natural ecosystems. The rapid cooling would threaten crops, which require sunlight for growth, and could trigger widespread food shortages if darkness persists even briefly. Animal behavior would shift instantly. Nocturnal creatures might temporarily become more active, but diurnal animals would be thrown into chaos. Birds, adapted to the daytime, would lose their navigational cues, and ecosystems could start unraveling even within those 24 hours. The atmosphere itself might react subtly. Changes in solar radiation could affect weather patterns, possibly inducing unseasonal storms or creating pressure imbalances. As hours tick by with Earth cloaked in darkness, questions of cosmic scale begin to echo in minds. Is this a sign? A warning? Or perhaps the universe itself choosing a moment to remind us of its vast indifference? Philosophically, the disappearance of the sun underscores our fragile dependence on one celestial body, a single point of life's anchor in a universe teeming with emptiness. When darkness shrouds everything, it offers a stark reminder that existence is often measured by fleeting moments of light, fragile, unpredictable, and yet profoundly beautiful in their resilience. The day's temporary absence from the sun would leave us all contemplating not just our vulnerability, but also the mysterious and awe-inspiring universe we inhabit. Immediate shadow and silence. Without the sun's warmth and light, Earth's environment would plunge into an instant and profound darkness. The loss of its luminous presence would extinguish the sky, leaving a void that no artificial lighting could fully replicate. Shadows would vanish into absolute blackness. The familiar outlines of trees, buildings, and distant mountains would disappear into an ominous murk that defies visual comprehension. For the first few moments, there's a strange calm. The world remains eerily silent, as if a giant mute switch has been flipped. Day has turned into night without warning, yet no stars emerge. The universe isn't calm for long. This sudden absence of sunlight would cause the entire planet to begin a rapid cascade of environmental and psychological reactions. People who are outdoors would immediately encounter the chilling effect of darkness, a darkness so complete it's scarcely imaginable during daytime hours. Streetlights, car headlights, and cell phone screens would become the only sources of illumination, feeble attempts to pierce the absolute void. The silence would compound the surreal feeling. Earth's natural sounds, birds, insects, and the hum of our daily lives would become muffled or fade away entirely. There might be a temporary sense of stillness, as if nature itself is holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. Yet beneath that calm, a primal anxiety would stir. Humans, attuned to the sun's cycle for survival, would likely feel an instinctive panic. The absence of light acts almost as a reminder of mortality, the fragility of life existing under a relentless universe. Across the globe, reactions would spiral into chaos, spiraling from disbelief to alarm. Emergency broadcasts would scramble to analyze the event, speculating whether this is a cosmic anomaly or some catastrophic solar event. Scientists would scramble to understand what caused the blackout: solar radiation spikes, a sudden cosmic eclipse, or perhaps something more inexplicable. Governments might order evacuations of vulnerable areas, deploy military or emergency services to assist those in panic, and attempt to create artificial illumination. Yet no technological or human effort could mimic the sun's power in a matter of hours. Psychological effects would be profound: anxiety, confusion, and maybe even despair. The entire fabric of daily life, work, sleep, societal routines, would be shredded overnight by this inexplicable darkness that wraps the planet in a shroud of silent fear. This silence and shadow are stark reminders of how deeply humans depend on natural light, not just for survival, but for our mental and emotional equilibrium. As darkness persists, thoughts of the vastness beyond Earth might intrude more forcefully into consciousness, questions about our place in an indifferent universe. In these initial hours, it becomes apparent that the sun isn't just a celestial object, it is the heartbeat of life itself. Its sudden disappearance exposes our vulnerability, stripping away the comfort of familiarity. Sitting in complete darkness, some might find a strange clarity, an awakening to how much our existence is intertwined with the sun's unwavering presence. Perhaps, in this void, we are reminded that light is more than illumination. It is a symbol of hope, continuity, and the quiet resilience of life amid cosmic silence. Disruption of daylight and darkness cycles. When the sun suddenly vanishes from the sky, the immediate loss of natural light would cause chaos across every corner of the globe. Daylight, which countless species rely upon for survival and reproduction, would disappear instantly, plunging the world into an unnatural darkness. For humans, the abrupt halt of sunlight would disrupt our internal biological clocks, the circadian rhythms that regulate sleep, hormone production, metabolism, and mood. Without sunlight, these rhythms would be thrown into disarray, leading to widespread confusion and disorientation. People accustomed to waking with the sunrise and winding down at sunset would find their routines shattered, as their bodies no longer receive the cues they rely on to regulate their biological processes. As hours pass without the sun, the psychological toll would intensify. Anxiety would creep in as individuals grapple with the surreal and ominous darkness that now blankets the environment. The cycle of day and night, which has persisted for millions of years, would vanish in an instant, causing a collective sense of loss and vulnerability. Without the predictable pattern of light and dark, humans would struggle to differentiate between the boundaries of day and night, often mistaking one for the other. Sleep patterns would collapse, leading to insomnia for some and exhaustion for others. Children, especially, whose routines depend heavily on sunlight, would be thrown into confusion, further compounded by the eerie silence and the absence of natural cues. Environmental systems would also immediately feel the impact. Plants that depend on sunlight for photosynthesis would shut down their energy production, causing a ripple of consequences through food chains. Artificial light sources would become the only means to sustain plant life, but the transition from natural to artificial hues might have unpredictable effects on growth rates and ecosystems. Wildlife would respond instinctively. Nocturnal creatures might find their habitats becoming more active, while diurnal animals would be disoriented and stressed. The natural progression of day turning into night, which aids migrations, foraging, and predator-prey interactions, would be disrupted entirely. This chaos could last hours, but the long-term effects might influence ecological balances for years to come. When the sun suddenly reappears after 24 hours, the world would face a mixture of relief and bewilderment. The reintroduction of daylight would restore some semblance of normalcy, but the psychological scars and environmental scars would linger. Society would need to adapt rapidly, managing widespread sleep deprivation, mental health strains, and ecological recovery. All of this leads to a broader reflection. Our existence is anchored in natural cycles that seem invincible, yet they are fragile in the face of cosmic anomalies. The absence and return of sunlight serve as a stark reminder that life is continuously intertwined with the universe's rhythms, a delicate dance that can be disrupted in an instant, leaving behind questions about resilience, dependence, and our place in the cosmos. Collapse of photosynthesis and agriculture. Without the sun's radiant energy, the foundation of life on Earth begins to crumble in ways that are both immediate and insidious. Photosynthesis, the miraculous process that sustains nearly all plant life, algae, and phytoplankton, halts instantaneously. In the first few moments, leaves lose their vibrant green, and the lush forests start to fade into a ghostly monotony. Chlorophyll, which depends on sunlight, can no longer produce the sugars that fuel plant growth. As a result, crops, corn, wheat, rice, touched by sunlight for generations, stall in their development or die outright. This sudden vacuum in energy transportation destabilizes entire ecosystems, causing a ripple effect that quickly extends from farms to global markets. As hours stretch into days, the visible signs of collapse intensify. Farmers, whose livelihoods hinge on predictable sunlight cycles, lose hope as their fields yellow and wither. Globally, food supply chains grind to a halt. Livestock that depend on fresh forage face starvation. Fisheries suffer as phytoplankton populations dwindle without sunlight to sustain photosynthesis that fuels marine food webs. The impact on agriculture is catastrophic not just for food security, but also for economic stability. Countries heavily reliant on export crops see their economies devastated overnight. Panic spreads as governments scramble to address impending famine, knowing that without sunlight, the fundamental process that creates the cornerstone of agriculture ceases entirely. Psychologically, humanity's collective psyche begins to unravel. Anxiety morphs into despair as the realization dawns that this darkness isn't temporary, it's indefinite. Cultures that thrive on farming traditions confront existential crises, and the human spirit wrestles with a profound loss of purpose. The silence of a sunless world is deafening. Hope diminishes as the green shoots of life die off, leaving behind barren landscapes. The natural world's vibrant tapestry unravels more quickly than anyone anticipated, forcing a confrontation with mortality itself, both of the planet and of civilization. The environmental consequences become intertwined with this mental anguish. As plant life perishes, oxygen production declines sharply, threatening to tip the atmospheric balance and accelerate the suffering. In the long run, this brief darkness underscores a deeper truth. Life on Earth is intricately woven into the fabric of sunlight. Our reliance on a star that appears to burn endlessly is a fragile illusion. When its glow is suddenly extinguished, the entire biological and social structure begins to disintegrate, revealing the delicate, interconnected nature of existence. The brief lapse of sunlight, a mere 24 hours, serves as a stark reminder that life's resilience is ultimately tethered to the natural rhythms of the universe. It prompts reflection on what it means to be alive in a universe governed by such delicate balances, a realization that sometimes the most profound shifts come in an instant, forever altering the way we perceive our place within it. Chaos in the atmosphere and weather patterns. The sudden absence of the sun would cause instant upheaval in the planet's atmospheric systems, sparking chaos that no one could predict. Without the sun's warmth and energy, temperature gradients across the globe would plummet, causing immediate shifts in air pressure and wind patterns. The thick, warm air that normally circulates above tropical regions would begin to collapse, leading to a rapid cooling of the atmosphere. This cooling would set off a chain reaction, disrupting the normal convective processes that drive weather systems. Thunderstorms, which rely on temperature contrasts, would fade or become erratic, and jet streams, the powerful ribbons of wind that govern much of our weather, would weaken significantly or change direction altogether. As days pass without solar radiation, the atmosphere would become increasingly unstable. Layers of cold air would sink, creating a tumult of turbulence and strange, unpredictable gusts. Some areas might experience sudden, violent storms driven by the extreme temperature differences between still warm ocean surfaces and the frigid air above. Conversely, others might see a stark calm, as the usual energy that fuels weather phenomena diminishes to near silence. High-altitude clouds, usually indicators of weather changes, would become rare or disappear altogether, leaving the sky eerily clear or perpetually overcast with a pallid gray hue. Such drastic shifts would lead to widespread environmental stress, impacting plant life, animal migration patterns, and the very cycles that sustain ecosystems. The psychological toll on populations around the globe would be staggering. People rely heavily on common weather cues, sunrise colors, seasonal changes, even the occasional storm, to orient themselves and maintain a sense of normalcy. With no sun for 24 hours, confusion and fear would be pervasive. Emergency services would be overwhelmed by panic, and the sheer surrealism of the darkness would play havoc with mental health. Without the comforting predictability of sunlight, a pervasive sense of disorientation, dread, and helplessness might settle in. Entire communities could experience a collective psychological shift as the absence of the sun dissolves the boundary between day and night, leaving only an endless, unnatural twilight. Over that brief period, the atmosphere would attempt to find new equilibria, but the results would be unpredictable. The interplay of cooling temperatures, shifting wind patterns, and collapsing weather systems would leave behind changes difficult to anticipate. This event would serve as a stark reminder of how finely tuned and interdependent all these processes are, revealing how vulnerable our climate is to such an extraordinary interruption. In the grand scheme, it prompts reflection on humanity's delicate place within the universe's vast, intricate dance of forces, an echo of how much remains beyond our control, yet fundamentally connected to the cosmos' continual, mysterious rhythm. Collapse of global electrical grids. Without the sun's energy fueling the planet, a cascade of failures would ripple through our electrical infrastructure, exposing the fragility of modern civilization. Power grids, intricate webs of high-voltage transmission lines and interconnected networks, rely heavily on consistent environmental stability and stable frequency inputs, both of which would vanish in an instant if the sun disappeared. The sudden absence of solar radiation would cause immediate shifts in the Earth's ionosphere and magnetosphere, disrupting satellite communications and leading to unpredictable oscillations in the electrical grid. As these disruptions unfold, nuclear and conventional power plants dependent on grid stability would face catastrophic shutdowns. Many would trip offline unexpectedly to prevent damage, while others might be forced into protective states due to frequency fluctuations. The loss of grid synchronization would set off chain reactions, transformers would overload or collapse, and blackouts could extend globally within hours. The interconnected nature of these systems means that a failure in one region would inevitably cascade into others, creating a domino effect that takes down entire countries' electrical infrastructures with alarming immediacy. Furthermore, the psychological and societal effects would intensify this chaos. As darkness envelopes the entire planet, panic would spread. Fear of a prolonged blackout, concern about safety, and despair over loss of communication and essential services. Hospitals would lose power, freezing life-saving equipment and food supplies decaying in cold storage. Transportation systems, airports, subways, trains, dependent on electricity would grind to a halt, trapping people in airports and cities. The energy crisis would become a psychological crisis, with every minute revealing just how vulnerable our reliance on electricity truly is. Environmental repercussions would compound the situation. Without electricity, water treatment plants would fail, leading to contamination and shortages. Fossil fuel and nuclear plants might emit dangerous levels of radiation or pollutants during their shutdowns if they aren't protected, adding to long-term environmental harm. The sudden darkness would sap the planet's vibrancy, leaving it silent and cold, an eerie reflection of our dependency. In such a moment, the question lingers: how much of our modern identity is woven into the invisible web of power that now disappears? The collapse of the grids exposes not only our infrastructure's fragility, but also the delicate balance we maintain with the natural world, and how easily that balance could be shattered by the absence of a single star. Loss of communication and satellite functionality. In the silent, shadowed hours following the disappearance of the sun, the global network of satellites and communication systems would instantly plunge into chaos. Satellite communications depend heavily on signals bouncing between Earth and orbiting devices, many of which are calibrated to the sun's constant radiation and electromagnetic environment. Without sunlight, these signals would become distorted or entirely gainless, throwing satellite navigation, television broadcasts, and internet connectivity into disarray. Major cities, dependent on GPS for everything from air traffic control to ride-sharing services, would suddenly find their positioning data unreliable, creating a ripple effect of confusion and logistical nightmares. Critical infrastructure such as power grids, financial systems, and emergency services rely on satellite data to operate smoothly. When satellites cease to relay information or lose their calibration due to sudden shifts in electromagnetic interference, communication links fracture. Stock exchanges and banking networks, which depend on satellite-based timing and synchronization, could experience delays or inaccuracies in financial transactions. Meanwhile, military and government communication channels, often secured by satellite links, would be cut off, raising concerns about national security as commanders scramble to adapt to a suddenly disconnected world. The loss of these channels would leave many agencies blind to simultaneous crises beginning to unfold below, exacerbating a growing sense of helplessness. People across the globe would astonishingly notice a rapid breakdown in the flow of information, leading to mounting anxiety. News outlets, reliant on satellite feeds, would suddenly go dark, cutting off real-time updates about the unfolding chaos. Social media, despite its terrestrial roots, would become less reliable as most smartphones and communication devices depend on GPS and satellite infrastructure for services like location tagging and high-speed data. The psychological toll would intensify as individuals struggle to grasp the magnitude of the blackout. For many, uncertainty would become overwhelming, knowing that somewhere behind the scenes, satellites are helplessly orbiting in darkness, unable to relay vital information, would deepen a collective sense of vulnerability. Environmental consequences might seem indirect, but would be no less profound. Emergency responders, unable to coordinate effectively due to lost satellite data, would face difficulty organizing rescue operations or distributing supplies. Search and rescue missions lost in the dark, both literally and figuratively, would underscore the fragility of our technological reliance. Communication disruptions would ripple through global supply chains, potentially halting the transportation of food, medicine, and essential resources. In the end, the sudden absence of sunlight and the subsequent blackout of satellite communications would serve as a stark reminder of how delicate the web of modern connectivity truly is, exposing the extent to which civilization's progress is intertwined with electromagnetic signals racing through space. As day turns into night without warning, minds would wrestle with the realization that human existence is tethered to forces beyond everyday understanding, an intricate dance with electromagnetic phenomena, a fragile thread holding modern civilization in place. The horizon of uncertainty stretches far beyond technology, touching philosophical core questions about our dependence on constant illumination and the illusions of permanence. In that brief darkness, many might contemplate the core of what it means to be truly lost, stripped not only of light but of the communication threads that connect us across time and space. It becomes a reminder, perhaps, that even amid chaos, there is an opportunity to seek meaning in the silence and the shadows. Desperate search for explanations and hope. The sudden disappearance of the sun for 24 hours would ignite chaos and universal confusion. Temperatures plummeting almost instantly, the Earth's surface could see a drop of 20 degrees C or more, plunging the world into an icy shadow. Cities would be plunged into darkness, streetlights flickering out as panic spreads through communities. Without sunlight, photosynthesis would halt immediately, causing crops to wither and global food supplies to deteriorate rapidly, further fueling fears of a planetary crisis. Emergency responses would flood social media and news outlets, scientists, governments, and citizens alike desperately seeking rational explanations, anything that could illuminate this unprecedented event. The human mind naturally searches for patterns, for causality. Was it a cosmic anomaly, a yet undetected solar system disruption, or some catastrophic technological failure? In the immediate aftermath, the global reaction would swing between panic and disbelief. Respective governments would scramble to maintain order, deploying military units and emergency services in an effort to protect populations from the psychological toll. People experiencing fear, confusion, and helplessness would clutch at any signs of hope. Rumors of solar recovery, theories about extraterrestrial intervention, or even spiritual explanations. Religious communities might interpret the silence as a divine test or an apocalyptic sign, while scientists would pore over atmospheric data and satellite imagery, searching for anomalies that could reveal the cause. Yet, as the hours stretched on without sunlight returning, despair would begin to seep into collective consciousness. The instinct to cling to hope becomes more fragile in the pitch-black dark, both literally and metaphorically. Psychologically, the impact would be profound, shaking society's very sense of stability. Without sunlight, human circadian rhythms would be thrown into disarray, affecting sleep patterns and mental health. Anxiety, depression, and a sense of existential dread could spike sky-high, leading some to question not just the sun's return but the fabric of their understanding of the universe. Environmental systems would take a hit, oceans cooling, wind patterns changing abruptly, and wildlife disoriented as animal behaviors warp. In this crisis, every attempt at explanation intensifies. Theories about alien interference, references to ancient prophecies, or dismissals that this is temporary and it will pass. Scientists, despite their expertise, would grapple with the inability to provide immediate answers, heightening the tension between knowledge and the unknown. Amid this chaos, a faint but persistent hope might emerge, rooted in faith, resilience, or scientific curiosity. Some might see this darkness as a test of human unity, a challenge to invent and adapt in the face of the inexplicable. Others would seek solace in the idea that this event, terrifying and bewildering as it is, could be a temporary anomaly, a moment in a vast cosmic rhythm that the universe itself is trying to communicate in a language beyond human understanding. As the hours go by and the sun remains absent, reflections on impermanence and the fragile threads of hope become more poignant. The darkness forces individuals and societies alike to confront their limitations, but also awakens a capacity for resilience, insisting that even in the void, the human spirit can find a flicker of light, whether in shared despair or renewed faith in the eventual return of the sun. How life reacts in the first hours. Without the sun's warmth and light, the immediate chaos would be palpable. The first few hours would feel almost surreal, a profound silence settling over the planet as all sources of natural illumination vanish. The sky darkens rapidly, not just from the absence of sunlight, but from the sudden loss of the luminescence that sustains life on every level. Temperatures would plummet sharply, Alarming colder temperatures would start to spread inward from the surface, especially in regions that rely heavily on solar heating. In the absence of sunlight, photosynthesis halts instantly, causing plants to stop producing oxygen and disrupting the base of the energy chain for all living organisms. Meteorologically, without sunlight to drive the Earth's weather systems, atmospheric activity would immediately begin to slow. Storms, which depend on temperature contrasts created by the sun, would diminish in intensity. The familiar blue sky would be replaced by an ominous, unbroken darkness. As hours pass, the environmental shift becomes more terrifying. Oceans, no longer heated by the sun, begin to cool, and the air thickens with a growing sense of bleakness. Human bodies, not built to cope with sudden cold, start to feel the chilling effects. Shivering becomes a common instinct. As the body's core temperature drops rapidly, people instinctively seek heat but find it increasingly scarce or impossible to find. Psychologically, the impact is immediate and profound. Panic ripples through communities, especially in urban centers. Without light, navigation becomes impossible in many cases, and fear of the unknown heightens. People clutch their loved ones, instinctively seeking comfort amid the darkness. Emergency responders scramble for solutions. Power grids fail quickly as backup generators, often dependent on fuel rather than solar power, are overwhelmed or fail entirely. News outlets and governments broadcast urgent messages, trying to maintain calm, but the collective consciousness is gripped by dread. The sight of a world suddenly stripped of the sun's omnipresent influence leaves individuals facing a stark, unsettling truth. Our dependence on sunlight was more profound than most realized, embedding a deep sense of vulnerability into the collective psyche. For some, the first hours come with unexpected surprises and resilience. Scientists and engineers rush to activate backup systems, Tesla's star battery systems, if available, or nuclear power plants, which may be the only sources of reliable energy in this darkness. Yet, even with such measures, the natural order is broken. People notice for the first time the delicate balance that sunlight once maintained, regulating seasons, guiding migration patterns, and supporting ecosystems, shattered instantly. Every person who witnesses the world without its familiar glow begins to confront a primal truth. Life, in its most vulnerable state, depends fundamentally on that light, an unseen force that shapes not just our environment, but our very existence and psyche. The sudden absence of the sun's warmth is a stark reminder that, despite technological advancements, humanity is still at the mercy of natural forces far beyond control. The Earth's temperatures plunge rapidly. When the sun suddenly disappeared for just 24 hours, the immediate scientific consequence would be a rapid and staggering drop in Earth's surface temperatures. Without the sun's energetic rays warming our planet, the surface would begin to lose heat at an alarming rate. In the first few minutes, the temperature would drop by several degrees Celsius, but within hours, the decline would become exponential. Since the sun is our primary source of warmth, the atmosphere would start to cool dramatically as radiant heat escapes into space. Within just a few hours, global temperatures could plummet by 10 to 20 degrees Celsius, turning what was once a temperate day into an icy landscape. This would not be a gradual slip into cold, it would be akin to flipping a switch in the climate system. The oceans, which store a significant amount of heat, would also begin to cool rapidly, releasing stored warmth into the atmosphere and space alike. The result: the air would turn crisp, sharply colder, and increasingly uninhabitable for most forms of life. Coastal regions, which rely heavily on the sun's warmth, would be among the first to experience freezing temperatures, possibly dropping below freezing in mere hours, even during daytime. Humans, animals, and plants would be caught in a shockwave of environmental chaos. People would wake up to unthinkable cold, and the panic would spread quickly. Emergency systems would quickly become overwhelmed, and supplies of heat or fuel would deplete faster than anyone could manage. The psychological effect would be profound, a collective sense of vulnerability, disbelief, and despair. As temperatures continue to drop, The fabric of society would strain under the external pressures of survival, electricity might fade as power grids become strained, and food sources would dwindle as crops freeze or die off. The rapid cooling would create a ripple of panic, disbelief, and adaptation as humans scramble to understand an alien world plunged unexpectedly into cold darkness. Despite this immediate crisis, some might find a strange, quiet reflection in the overwhelming silence that accompanies such a drastic change. The planet, unshielded by the sun's warmth, would become eerily still. Nature's resilience would be tested. Many species would struggle to survive, while some hardy microorganisms might endure in underground or insulated environments. The profound slowdown of biological activity would reshape ecosystems overnight, leaving behind a stark reminder of how dependent life is on that radiant star in the sky. In the silence of this frozen world, questions about existence, survival, and the fragile balance of life itself could become unavoidable. The temperature plunge, rapid and relentless, acts as both a physical and philosophical reminder that even the most familiar universe can change in an instant, revealing the delicate threads that tie life to the sun's steady glow. Marine and animal responses to darkness. The instant the sun disappears, the complex web of life inhabiting our oceans and waterways begins to feel the shockwaves of cosmic silence. Marine animals rely heavily on visual cues, and in the absence of sunlight, their behavior shifts dramatically. Schools of fish that usually dart and weave in unison to evade predators might panic, clustering tighter than ever in search of security. Some species, like coral reef inhabitants that depend on photosynthesis, quickly turn dormant or retreat into protective crevices. Bioluminescent organisms, jellyfish, certain types of plankton, and some deep-sea creatures start to glow brighter as they instinctively respond to the sudden darkness, creating eerie, ghostly displays beneath the surface. This sudden change can cause chaos in the food chain, as predators accustomed to hunting by sight are suddenly at a disadvantage, possibly leading to a cascade of starvation and disorientation. Marine mammals such as dolphins and whales, which rely on echolocation for navigation and hunting, face immediate challenges. The lack of sunlight strips away their primary visual cues, forcing them to depend more heavily on sonar. But in uncharted darkness, the effectiveness of echolocation depends on the acoustic environment, which might be altered by changing water temperatures and the behavior of other animals. Disrupted communication among pods could cause animals to become disoriented, stray away from their groups, or accidentally collide with objects in their environment. Certain species might even surface more frequently, desperate for air or trying to catch any residual signals from surface surroundings, leading to increased stress and fatigue, making survival an instinctual scramble. The psychological toll on marine life cannot be overstated. Many animals have circadian rhythms finely tuned to the cycle of day and night, governing feeding, breeding, and resting patterns. Unnatural darkness throws these cycles into disarray. Marine creatures may become more aggressive or, conversely, lethargic, as their natural behaviors are interrupted. For some, this heightened state of alertness can be exhausting, pushing them towards a breakdown of normal biological functions. Underwater ecosystems, already delicate, risk tipping into chaos. As the hours pass without sunlight, the collective stress and confusion could lead to mass migrations, abandonment of breeding grounds, or premature deaths of vulnerable species. The ocean's intricate balance teeters on the edge, all because a celestial body simply vanished for a day. Humans, observing the sudden shift from light to deep, unnatural darkness, grapple with growing anxiety and despair. The reactions of marine animals serve as a mirror for the fragility of life, illustrating how dependent we all are on natural cycles. It underscores the profound interconnectedness of the planet's systems, where the disappearance of one element unleashes a ripple of consequences. As the darkness finally lifts, revealing the sun's return, there's a strange, introspective pause, a reminder that existence hangs in a delicate cosmic dance. In this fleeting void, we are confronted with the reality that life persists through resilience, adaptation, and the persistent rhythm of light and darkness, a rhythm that sustains the universe's dance far beyond what's visible to the eye. Human panic and societal breakdown. When the sun suddenly vanishes for a full 24 hours, an immediate sense of dread sweeps across the globe. No warning, no rational explanation, just an unimaginable darkness that blankets the planet. In the initial moments, disbelief ripples through communities, quickly giving way to chaos. People instinctively seek answers, but none are forthcoming. Emergency systems designed to respond to typical crises are rendered useless because the crisis is rooted in something fundamentally beyond human control, an entire star disappearing from sight. Television screens go dark, power grids flicker or shut down, and the internet stutters into silence. This sudden loss of light and warmth triggers a wave of panic that spreads faster than the blackout itself. As hours pass, what begins as confusion morphs into terror. Without sunlight, the entire biological and ecological balance begins to unravel. Food supplies, already stressed in many parts of the world, become increasingly scarce due to disrupted farming cycles and frozen infrastructure. Gas stations, unable to replenish fuel supplies without electricity, close down, spiraling the society into a standstill. The fear of losing loved ones mounts as hospitals and emergency services struggle to operate without power, creating a toxic mix of helplessness and despair. In urban centers, mobs form out of desperation, some peaceful, others violent, as people scramble for resources, shelter, and warmth. The psychological toll is staggering. Helplessness eclipses rational thought, and the collective sense of safety evaporates. Everywhere, social organizations break down. Governments, overwhelmed by the scope of the crisis, fail to maintain order. Authorities' attempts at communication waver, creating rumors that run wild, predictions of celestial retribution, conspiracy theories, or stories of mass abandonment. The sense of shared normalcy disintegrates, replaced by a primal fight-or-flight mentality. In some regions, communities attempt to band together, sharing whatever resources remain, but these bonds are fragile. As temperatures drop with the missing solar radiation, the threat of hypothermia begins to claim lives, further amplifying widespread anxiety. The collective psyche becomes a landscape of fear, where suspicion and paranoia flourish, and the fragile veneer of civilization begins to crack. By the time the full 24 hours end, the world is fundamentally changed. The initial panic may subside, but the scars remain, not just physically, but psychologically. The realization that a vast, uncontrolled cosmic force could turn daily life upside down without warning sends shockwaves through human consciousness. For many, the event remains an indelible trauma, a reminder of our vulnerability and the thin veneer that holds society together. In the quiet after the darkness, questions linger about our place in the universe, resilience, and whether humanity has the strength to rebuild amid uncertainty. The darkness leaves behind an unsettling truth. In the grand scale of existence, we are not as indispensable as we might like to believe, yet somehow, within chaos, a quiet hope persists that light can return, if not from the sky, then from within ourselves. The return of the sun, 24 hours later. A sudden disappearance of the sun for an entire 24 hours would ripple through every facet of life on Earth, triggering a cascade of immediate and long-term reactions that stretch from the tangible to the profound. As darkness envelopes the planet, nighttime occurring in broad daylight, initial chaos erupts. Communication systems dependent on satellite signals would be disrupted, causing widespread confusion. Power grids, especially those reliant on solar energy, would face unprecedented instability. Solar farms would suddenly cease generating electricity, plunging entire regions into blackout. Streets that normally glow with activity would fall eerily silent, and the sky, void of the sun's familiar glow, would be cloaked in an unnatural darkness that defies easy description. People would panic, confused by the sudden cold, the absence of warmth, and the eerie shadow world that feels both alien and ominous. Scientists and governments worldwide would scramble to understand what had happened, their efforts hampered by the absence of the sun's predictable signals. Climate patterns would falter. Temperatures would plummet rapidly in many areas, causing immediate threats to agriculture, wildlife, and human habitation. The psychological toll would be staggering. Centuries of understanding that the sun's rising and setting defined human life suddenly shattered. Anxiety and fear would dominate conversations, manifesting in everything from frantic searches for explanations to existential dread. The world's collective psyche would unravel, grappling with the unsettling notion that the sun, our primary anchor, had vanished without warning, leaving humans stranded in an undefined limbo. The natural environment would begin to change at a disturbing pace. With darkness prolonged, plants and animals reliant on sunlight for survival would start to falter. Photosynthesis would halt, disrupting food chains at multiple levels. Some species might attempt to adapt, seeking artificial light or shifting behaviors, but many would struggle to survive. The cold intensifies without solar warmth, causing lakes and rivers to freeze more rapidly. People might turn to artificial sources of light and heat, but these solutions would be temporary patches on a much larger wound. As hours tick by, the eerie quiet of the world would deepen, and the understanding would dawn that Earth's rhythms depend on the sun in ways more fundamental than anyone had consciously realized before. This pause reveals a fragile web connecting all living things, a delicate balance that's easy to overlook when brighter days are constant. Finally, as the 24-hour blackout begins to lift and the sun's return becomes imminent, a complex wave of relief, reflection, and hope would roll across humanity. When the first golden ray pierces the horizon, there's an almost visceral sense of rebirth. The world visibly reawakens. Warmth begins to seep back into the air, plants stretch toward the returning light, and shadows retreat. Yet, beneath the surface, a deeper understanding might emerge, the realization that life's dependence on the sun is a silent acknowledgement of continuous vulnerability. For in losing the sun, humans would confront a stark truth. Their existence is intertwined inseparably with natural forces far beyond their control. The fleeting darkness leaves behind a renewed appreciation for the cosmic balance, a reminder that even in the grandest scales, life is a delicate dance with the universe's unpredictable rhythms. Rebuilding in the aftermath. Without the sun's warmth and light, the fabric of human civilization begins to unravel almost immediately. The first 24 hours see chaos unfurling across every corner of the planet. Power grids strain and then fail as the sun's energy, integral to solar-powered systems, disappears. Destabilized electrical systems threaten to plunge entire regions into darkness, with blackouts extending for days as backup generators are exhausted and infrastructure collapses under the strain. People cling to their phones and emergency supplies, frantically trying to contact loved ones or verify news, though, in truth, there's little beyond confusion and fear circulating. As hours pass with no sunlight, the psychological toll becomes unmistakably severe. Humans are fundamentally wired for daylight. Our circadian rhythms depend on the regular cycle of the sun. The sudden absence ignites panic and despair, triggering anxiety, depression, and a growing sense of vulnerability. Emergency responses kick in, but with no warning, authorities scramble to maintain order amid mounting confusion. Communities huddle together in the dark, trying to adapt, to find comfort and direction. Leaders speak of resilience, but underneath, the uncertainty gnaws at everyone's psyche, revealing how fragile our collective sense of safety truly is. Environmental effects are equally devastating. Temperatures plummet swiftly as Earth's surface begins to cool without the sun's heat. Water bodies freeze over, crops wither or die outright in the absence of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis halts entirely, threatening the entire food chain from tiny plankton to humans. The atmosphere, powered by the interaction of solar energy, begins to change. Chemical reactions slow, and cloud cover thickens, further blocking out any residual warmth. It's a chain reaction of despair, compounded by a world suddenly devoid of its life-giving star. Emergency food stocks are inadequate for long-term survival, and the loss of agriculture sets the stage for a worldwide crisis as weeks extend into months. In this chaos, efforts to rebuild hinge on ingenuity, community, and adaptability. Survivors turn their focus inward: shared resources, mutual aid, innovative solutions. Underground farms sprout amid darkness, utilizing artificial light and hydroponics to grow food. Researchers and engineers, driven by necessity, accelerate development of alternative energy sources, nuclear, geothermal, and wind, hoping to fill the void left by the sun's absence. The global economy stalls, forcing nations to rethink priorities and dependencies. Humanity's resilience is tested. It's a slow, uncertain process of redefining what shelter, survival, and progress mean in a world without sunlight. Ultimately, this crisis becomes a mirror for something deeper: the intertwined fate of life, environment, and consciousness. Humanity confronts the reality that the universe is unpredictable and that survival may depend not just on technology, but on a profound understanding of our place within this cosmic dance. The question persists: how do we rebuild not only our physical world, but also our collective perspective, when a star that nurtures all life has momentarily disappeared? Perhaps, after the darkness, the true rebirth begins, not just of systems or structures, but of awareness itself, echoing a quiet reminder that even in obliteration, there lies the seed of renewal. The sudden disappearance of the sun for just 24 hours would send shockwaves through every facet of life on Earth. Initially, the world would be plunged into an eerie, unnatural darkness, an absence so profound that it would feel almost surreal. Temperature drops would commence rapidly, especially in regions reliant on sunlight for warmth, leading to an immediate sense of disorientation. The atmosphere would begin to react in unpredictable ways: clouds thickening as colder air sinks, unusual twilight lingering in the skies, and the natural cycle of day turning into an unrecognizable void. The environmental impact wouldn't be limited to temperature alone. Photosynthesis, the foundation of most food chains, would halt abruptly. Plants, deprived of sunlight, would begin to wilt and die, setting off a chain reaction threatening ecosystems and agriculture alike. Across the globe, people's reactions would vary, but the collective unease would be palpable. Governments and scientists would scramble for explanations, their urgency magnified by the sheer incomprehensibility of such a phenomenon. People would likely invoke fears of an apocalyptic event or extraterrestrial intervention, leading to mass paranoia. In urban centers, blackout-like conditions would amplify panic, as reliance on artificial light and energy becomes painfully evident. In rural and less developed areas, the impacts on food supply and daily life would be even more immediate and severe. The psychological toll would manifest strongly, people feeling helpless, vulnerable, and fragmented by something so fundamentally unnatural. The terror of total darkness eclipsing the natural sense of time and space would create a collective sense of despair and fragility. Pressure on global infrastructure would escalate sharply. Power grids, often reliant on fossil fuels or nuclear plants, might be strained under the surge of emergency responses. Communication networks could face disruptions as systems depend heavily on electrical power, further isolating communities. Meanwhile, scientists, astronomers, and meteorologists would work feverishly to understand whether this disappearance was a temporary anomaly or a precursor to something far more catastrophic. Warning signs of climate anomalies, temperature fluctuations, abnormal weather patterns would start to surface, confirming fears that this 24-hour shadow could be a portent of deeper cosmic or environmental disturbances. The philosophical implications of such an event would be profound, a reminder of our fragile dependence on a cosmic order we seldom truly understand. It would challenge humanity's perception of permanence, forcing us to question the very fabric of reality and perhaps reconsider how we see ourselves in a universe that can momentarily wipe out the one constant we've known: light. As the darkness settles over the earth, the immediate chaos and fear ripple through every corner of humanity. Crops wither in the cold shadows, Power grids flicker and die, and a collective sense of vulnerability sinks deeper into our consciousness. The world holds its breath, trying to grasp the enormity of what just transpired, a reminder of how fragile our balance truly is. Yet, amid the panic, a quiet introspection begins to emerge, beckoning us to reflect on our dependence on that distant sun and the intricate web of life it sustains. Perhaps this absence shines a light on our resilience, or at least our capacity for hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. When the sun finally reappears, massive relief washes over us, but it's impossible to forget how close we came to losing everything, how interconnected we all are in ways we often overlook. It's a stark reminder that we live on a delicate, spinning sphere, fueled by unseen forces we can't control but can respect and cherish. This thought leaves us pondering. What if the sun's absence was a warning about taking our planet and its life-giving energy for granted? Now, more than ever, it's a call to cherish and protect the fragile balance of our world. We invite you to stay curious, to keep exploring these mysteries, and join us for more journeys into what makes our universe extraordinary. Because understanding our place in this cosmic dance isn't just fascinating, it's vital for the future we're shaping together.